The level of planning that Oda puts into his work is so ridiculous that I'm convinced the man has a time machine hidden somewhere in his studio. Today, I'm going to walk you through some of the most jaw-dropping examples of foreshadowing in One Piece. We're not talking about vague coincidences or fan theories that kind of make sense if you squint hard enough. We're talking about concrete evidence that Oda planted seeds in chapter 100 that didn't sprout until chapter 700. So first we need to talk about Haki. If you've been following One Piece for any length of time, you know that Haki is basically the most important power system in the entire series. It's what lets regular people fight Devil Fruit users. It's what separates the top tier fighters from everyone else. Oda was dropping hints about Haki literally hundreds of chapters before he ever explained what it actually was. Go back to the very first chapter of One Piece. Chapter 1, the beginning of everything. Shanks loses his arm saving Luffy from a Sea King, right? But before that happens, there's this moment where Shanks just glares at the Sea King and the thing freezes up. At the time, you probably thought it was just Shanks being intimidating because he's a powerful pirate, but no. That was Conqueror's Haki. Oda showed us one of the rarest and most powerful abilities in the entire One Piece world in the very first chapter, and nobody knew it. Fast forward to the Skypiea arc. Remember Mantra? That weird ability that Enel and his priests had that basically made them omniscient. They could predict attacks, sense people from miles away, and it seemed like some kind of godly power that only existed on the Sky Islands. Except it wasn't. That was Observation Haki. Oda literally introduced an entire branch of the Haki system and disguised it as something exclusive to Skypiea. And we didn't figure it out until Rayleigh started training Luffy on that island after Marineford, which was almost 300 chapters later. But it gets even better. During the Sabaudi Archipelago arc, we see Sentomaru and the Pacifistas using this strange black coating that lets them hit Logia users. At the time, it seemed like some kind of advanced technology or a new fighting technique. But after Marineford, Oda finally gave it a name, Armament Haki. And suddenly all those little moments where characters seemed to bypass Devil Fruit powers made perfect sense. Oda had been showing us the pieces of this puzzle for years, and he waited until the exact right moment to explain how they all fit together. Now let's talk about something that'll really make you appreciate Oda's planning. Laboon. Remember that giant whale at the beginning of the Grand Line who kept smashing his head against the Red Line? The Straw Hats meet him in chapter 102. We learn his tragic story about how he's been waiting 50 years for a pirate crew that promised to come back to him, but never did. It's emotional. It's heartbreaking, and Luffy promises that they'll bring Laboon's friend back to him someday. Most manga would wrap up a story like that within the same arc. Maybe you'd meet the lost crew member a few dozen chapters later, and it would be this nice, emotional reunion. But not Oda. Oda made us wait 357 chapters. That's not a typo. 357 chapters before Brook shows up, and we find out that he's the last surviving member of the Rumbar Pirates, the crew that Laboon has been waiting for all this time. When Brook finally does show up, that connection to Laboon isn't some last-minute addition to make his character more interesting. It was always part of the plan. The emotional weight of Brook's story only hits as hard as it does because we already knew Laboon. We already understood the depth of that promise. Oda made us care about a whale in chapter 102 so that when we met Brook in chapter 459, the impact would be devastating. That's the kind of long-term storytelling that makes you wonder if Oda has the entire series mapped out on some massive wall in his house, with red string connecting everything like he's solving a conspiracy theory about his own manga. By the way, if you like these kinds of breakdowns, consider subscribing. I do these every week, and that way you won't miss the next one. But let's keep going, because we're just getting started. Let's talk about Ace. Now, Ace's death at Marineford is still one of the most devastating moments in anime and manga history. Nobody saw it coming. We all thought he was going to be saved. But Oda had other plans. And here's the kicker. He told us what was going to happen way before it actually did. Back in chapter 520, there's this scene where Luffy is holding playing cards. One of them is the Ace of Spades, and right next to it, there's a card with a skull on it. At the time, it seemed like a random visual choice, just Luffy messing around with some cards. But that image was Oda literally showing us Ace's fate, the Ace card, the Death card, right there in the same panel. And nobody caught it until after Marineford, when fans went back and realised what they'd been looking at the whole time. But wait, there's more. Remember Ace's tattoo, the one on his arm that says ASCE? with the S crossed out. For the longest time, fans thought it was just a misspelling or maybe some kind of cool design choice. Turns out that crossed out S was foreshadowing the existence of Sabo, Ace's other brother who we didn't even know existed until Luffy's flashback after Marineford. That tattoo was Ace memorializing his brother who he thought was dead, and Oda put it on his character design from the very beginning. Even crazier, after Ace died, there was a cover story showing 3 cups of sake placed at his grave along with a newspaper. 3 cups. The same number from the Brotherhood ceremony between Luffy, Ace, and Sabo. Almost nobody in the One Piece world knew about that ceremony. So who left those cups? We find out hundreds of chapters later when Sabo is revealed to be alive. He was the one who visited Ace's grave. Oda showed us that Sabo was alive through a detail so small that most readers didn't even register it. That's not just foreshadowing. That's hiding entire plot twists in plain sight and trusting that your readers will go back and connect the dots later. Now, if you really want your mind blown, we need to talk about Gear 5 and Sun God Nika. This is probably the most elaborate piece of foreshadowing in the entire series, and it spans literal decades. When Luffy finally awakened his devil fruit during the fight with Kaido and transformed into Gear 5, it changed everything we thought we knew about his powers. Suddenly his Gum Gum fruit wasn't just a paramecia type, it was actually a mythical zoan called the Hito Hito no Mi, Model Nika, the fruit of a legendary warrior known as the Sun God who brought freedom and joy to oppressed people. This revelation shook the entire fan base, but here's what makes it absolutely wild. Oda had been hinting at this transformation since Skypiea. Go back to chapter 253, there's this panel of Luffy dancing around a bonfire with the Shandians after they liberate their homeland. He's silhouetted against the flames, arms raised, that massive grin on his face. Now look at the silhouette of Sun God Nika that we see in Wano. It's the exact same pose, the same joyful energy, the same sense of freedom and liberation. Oda drew Luffy in Nika's iconic pose almost 500 chapters before he revealed that Nika even existed. And it's not just that one panel. Throughout Skypiea, there are references to a sun god that the Shandians worship. At the time, it seemed like just part of the Ark's mythology, some local religion that added flavour to the world building. But Oda was planting seeds. He was establishing the concept of a sun god who represents freedom and joy, and he did it in an arc that's literally about liberating people from a tyrant who calls himself God, but the foreshadowing goes even deeper. Remember, chapter 569 has a title that seems straightforward at first. It's called White Monster, and most people assumed it was referring to Whitebeard, showing his monstrous strength despite being old and injured. But that's also the chapter where Luffy unconsciously uses Conqueror's Haki for the first time and shocks everyone on the battlefield. The coming of the White Monster. And what colour is Sun God Nika? Completely white. Oda hid a reference to Luffy's ultimate form in a chapter title, and he did it by making it seem like it was about someone else entirely. That's the level of planning we're dealing with here. Oda doesn't just think a few arcs ahead, he thinks in terms of decades. He plants visual references, thematic parallels, and tiny details that won't make sense until you've read another 1,000 chapters. And the craziest part, we're probably still missing stuff. There are probably panels from chapter 50 or chapter 200 that contain hints about things we won't understand until the series ends. Let's switch gears and talk about something that shows Oda's attention to detail in a different way, character backstories that were hinted at years before they were revealed. Take Sanji, for example. For most of the series, Sanji was just a straw hat cook with a chivalrous attitude and a mysterious past. We knew he came from the East Blue, worked at a restaurant, and had some kind of complicated history with a pirate named Zeph. But that was it. Except Oda was dropping hints about Sanji's true identity from incredibly early on. During the Alabasta arc, Sanji calls himself Mr. Prince when he's sneaking around. At the time, it just seemed like Sanji being dramatic and giving himself a cool nickname. But that was Oda telling us exactly what Sanji was, Prince. Then in Skypiea, Sanji mentions that he was born in the North Blue. That detail seemed random, just some backstory trivia, but it was establishing that Sanji came from the same sea as the Vinsmoke family. Fast forward to Whole Cake Island, and suddenly all those little details click into place. Sanji isn't just some random cook from the East Blue. He's the third son of the Vinsmoke family, a royal dynasty from the North Blue with advanced technology and superhuman abilities. His wanted poster even said, "Only alive" instead of "dead or alive," which seemed like a weird quirk until we learned that his father wanted him captured, not killed. Oda set up Sanji's entire backstory across multiple arcs, dropping breadcrumbs that didn't form a complete picture until we were hundreds of chapters deep into the story. And then there's the foreshadowing that's so subtle you'd never catch it on your first read-through, like Kanjuro being a traitor. For almost 6 years of real-world time, Kanjuro travelled with the Straw Hats and the Akazaya 9. He seemed like a loyal retainer to the Kazuki family, a little quirky with his art powers, but fundamentally trustworthy, except Oda was showing us the truth the entire time if you knew where to look. Kanjuro always drew with his left hand, but he was actually right-handed. Every time he used his devil fruit powers, he drew terribly on purpose. Crude, barely functional drawings that could get the job done but nothing more. But the moment he revealed himself as a traitor and switched sides, he drew a perfect, beautiful crane. Suddenly, his artistic ability was flawless, because he'd been holding back the whole time. And there's even more. In one panel, Kanjuro is eating lettuce, which in the language of flowers means cold-hearted person. Oda literally put a visual metaphor for Kanjuro's betrayal in a background detail that nobody would notice unless they were specifically looking for it. This kind of foreshadowing isn't just about big plot twists. It's about creating a world that feels alive and interconnected, where every character has depth, every detail matters, and nothing is wasted. And we're not even done yet, because some of the most mind-blowing foreshadowing in One Piece is happening right now, like the revelation that the world is sinking. In the Egghead arc, Vegapunk drops this bombshell that sea levels are rising and the entire world might eventually be underwater. It seems like a sudden massive plot development, except Oda has been building toward this for years. Think about where the world government is located, top of the red line, the highest point in the entire world. At the time, it just seemed like a power move, the people who rule the world literally looking down on everyone else. But now we know about the rising sea levels, and suddenly that location makes perfect sense. The world nobles put themselves in the one place that would be safe if the world started to flood. They've known about this threat for who knows how long, and they position themselves to survive it while everyone else drowns. And remember Rayleigh? After Roger's crew disbanded, he became a ship coater. His whole job is coating ships so they can travel underwater to reach Fishman Island. At the time, it was just a practical plot device to get the Straw Hats to the New World. But Oda was introducing the concept of underwater survival and protection against the ocean's pressure. If the world really is sinking, coating technology might be one of the only ways for people to survive. Rayleigh's seemingly random retirement job might end up being one of the most important skills in the entire series. Every panel, every character design, every throwaway line of dialogue could be hiding the key to understanding something that won't be revealed for another 10 years. And that's what makes One Piece so special. It rewards you for paying attention. It rewards you for going back and rereading. It treats its audience with respect and trusts that will appreciate the craftsmanship that goes into building a story this massive and interconnected. So the next time you're reading One Piece and you notice some weird detail that doesn't quite make sense, don't brush it off. Write it down. Screenshot it. Because 5 years from now, that random panel might end up being the most important piece of foreshadowing in the entire arc.